Staying, though, with the unrest and the looting of recent days, poverty, unemployment and the government's failure to meet people's needs are driving the violent behaviour seen in recent days. That's according to Equal Education. The organisation is also urging the government not only to reinstate but also to increase the COVID-19 relief grant. Equal Education's General Secretary Noncedo Madubedube joins me now to discuss this further. Noncedo, thank you very much for your time this evening. So you're saying that poverty and unemployment have contributed to the recent unrest. Surely you're not saying that that's the only cause. What in your mind has contributed most heavily to the start of this unrest?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to acknowledge and mourn the loss of life that we've experienced in the country over the last couple of days. I think as young people in particular, we are deeply worried and saddened to see the state of affairs in our country. And we've been talking to each other as organized youth across 5 provinces to think of the best ways to run interventions to deal with the symptoms of what we understand to have been a ticking time bomb in South Africa, and in fact that structural and systematic inequality are in fact the reasons that we find ourselves in this situation. I think so many days after the event, we can't still be talking about how this initially started or what kind of sort of forces and gangs and groups we think are at play here, but rather to have the government do more than deploy heavy machinery into our communities, but rather be accountable and proactive around the socioeconomic challenges of South Africa. We can't move away from the fact that we are the most unequal country in the world. And that means that black youth in particular and learners that are sitting inside volatile conditions in their school communities or idle on our street corners have been looking for an opportunity to take back and or demand what they feel is just and right to them. And at the moment, that is in the backdrop of massive food insecurity in the country, a massive shortage of jobs and work in the country. And this idea of government having pushed forward with introducing and steadfasting austerity and cutting spending on education, health and social welfare is the reason that we find ourselves in these situations. Anyone that you've spoken to on eNCA in the last 2 days has told you that this isn't a result of factionalism and or the arrest of Jacob Zuma, but rather because, excuse me, people are finding an opportunity to go into spaces or institutions where they understand there to be plenty and taking what they think they need in the immediate in their homes. So we know that the impact of COVID could have been cushioned by government if, in fact, our leaders thought about a people-centered approach to dealing with the impact of COVID in our country. And our constitution, as a matter of fact, and the institutions that govern it. So I'm thinking about Parliament, for example, should have been used to create powerful ways and meaningful ways for South Africans to, in fact, hold government accountable, but to also be at the heart of decisions, so engaged, informed, and invited to contribute to the ways that we're meant to be dealing with this current period of COVID and huge economic and socioeconomic strife in the country. So what's happened as a result of that not being the case is that we have been left feeling failed by the ruling party, failed by opposition parties, by Parliament, all of these institutions of state, by government as a whole, and feeling powerless. And this is how people are starting to think of reclaiming these structures. And we must say that we don't absolutely condone any of the behavior that is violent and volatile in our communities, because those things are hurting us, in fact. But what we are saying is that we must understand that it's systematic of something that government has absolutely caused over the last period. And so young people are saying today, we are going to go back into our streets as well. We're going to reclaim the narrative of what exactly is happening here and keep demanding that government reintroduce and increase the COVID-19 relief grant in the short term. But we are looking for the introduction of a basic income grant in the long term. We want and continue to demand the stopping completely of an austerity agenda. We've lost so much money in our basic education system, but we also know that the Department of Basic Education has said to us, we've lost about 70% of the learning losses that were meant to have been covered inside schools in the last year. And learners, black youth in particular, can't go back into these schooling environments to regain these learning losses in the immediate because our schools aren't ready and capacitated with adequate resources and safety and dignified resources to be able to ensure the safe return of learners and teachers. The last thing, just on the back of this idea of food insecurity in our country, which the President spoke of as well, there is a school nutrition program that is has over 6 billion rand allocated to it on an annual basis. And we're saying to the Department of Basic Education, please, it is not difficult to make sure that every province can in fact serve meals, a meal a day, nutritious meal a day to learners on a daily basis during the school period, even if the COVID regulations have in fact closed down schools momentarily. That's the best way to address these kinds of concerns. And so we're calling for structural reform, but we want it on our terms, and we're deeply concerned about the militia and the state repression that's taking place in our communities. And what we want to be extremely careful of and talk to people about in general society is that we are concerned about the livelihoods of children, because they become the most volatile and vulnerable during this period, of women and members of the LGBTQIA community. So these are the things that we are looking, the intersections of the different issues that we're looking at in our communities, and want to do something about.
Unfortunately, I do apologize. That is where we're going to have to leave it. But touching there on very complex issues at play currently, Noncedo, Madubedube from Equal Education, talking to us about their stance on the current unrest.